the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Amen. Let's pray in the words Jesus taught us. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. The Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. So the book we're looking at, Living Joy, is really become one of my favorites, and a little bit about joy. So in a recent study I've been doing, it's called The Fourth Quarter of Your Life, they challenge you to pick one virtue to work on in your fourth quarter. And the fourth quarter is defined for those of us that are 61 to 80. If you're 81 or older, you're in bonus time, overtime, or sudden death, depending upon how you categorize that. There's been a number of people in the class that are in, like Josh, probably you're in your 30s, aren't you, Josh? Mm-hmm. Yeah, probably 20s, right?
Yeah.
He's in the second quarter, so he's not even the third quarter yet.
I'm 33 yesterday.
Okay, so you are in the middle of the second quarter, so you're doing good. But even people that age are loving it because it helps them look forward to the later quarters of your life and think seriously about your rest of your life. And so one of the things they suggest is pick a fourth quarter virtue. So you're supposed to discern this through prayer and discernment with God. And I kind of had a sense that mine would be joy, but I wasn't really 100% sure. But I just kind of felt like that was the one for me. And I have not wavered since, so I'm still thinking it's joy, but God tells me it's another one. I'll shift. But so why joy? And I think a part of it, at least, is the fact that since I got ordained, I served under two pastors. I served under Father Al Humbrecht, and I served under Father Michael Woods. And now recently, my third is Father Doug. And Monsignor Al Humbrecht, an absolutely delightful person. You would never see him without joy at Mass, just celebrating, the sacraments and that kind of thing. And then, par excellence on joy is Father Michael, right? I mean, if you were around Father Michael for seconds, right, you knew this was a priest that was filled with joy. And we all remember those beautiful Easter Sunday mornings when he would run around in the parking lot. And the people that were coming with friends and family thought, who's the crazy man? Oh, that's our pastor. Oh, it is. Really? He's up in the trees, remember? He is risen. He is alive. He's not dead. You remember? He'd be running around, he's not dead. He's alive. He's risen. Right? So how many of us know that if we had to pick something about Father Michael, somewhere in there for sure, right, would be his disposition of joy? Wouldn't it be? There are other things. But isn't that sort of something you just kind of knew, having spent time around him? And I got to spend time around him, not just at Mass and in the sacraments, but I also got some time on the golf course with him, time in social time, and he was as fun a golfer as you could ever play with, as fun a person at a party as you'd ever be around. He took it wherever he went because it was within him, right? So we would play golf, and I hit a shot next to a tree, and I looked away for about 10 seconds, and my ball wouldn't be next to the tree anymore. And I would say, my ball used to be right next to that tree. And he'd say, oh, a leprechaun must have moved. And I would say, a leprechaun named Michael, I'll bet. And so I got even with him once. I hit the ball in the sand trap, and I lobbed it on the green. He's looking for the ball in the sand trap. Is that your ball up here? He looks at me. I think he was the only one that was allowed to move your ball, because he was the only Irishman in the group. But no, I moved it on him. But those are the kind of things that I really remember, about Father Michael was, no matter what experience I had with him, it was pretty much bar none, always filled with joy and uplifting. I didn't leave him being less up than I was before. Does that make sense? I mean, it was a kind of contagious joy. So hopefully, I'm maybe not at that level of joy, but something I'm working at and something that I think we can all benefit from. And as I said at Mass this morning, Jesus wants us to share his joy, and he wants our joy to be complete. Not kind of subdued or less than full, or even the opposite of joy, despair. We don't want to be in despair. We don't want to lack hope. things like that. So in this book, the author, who has a big old smile on his face, right at the top of the cover, right, says, you know, at the beginning, got joy. You know, you just like got milk, you know. And in the introduction, it's a beautiful little section on explaining the difference between joy and happiness. All right. And if you go to page 6, which is not in the introduction, I'm going to take you there first. He explains the difference between the words happiness and joy and the way he is going to use them. Right. So he says in that first footnote at the bottom there, I'll use the words happiness and joy interchangeably, excuse me, but with a preference for joy. Happiness has come to imply a contentedness based on circumstances. So you may be happy one minute and then not so happy the next minute. Right? So you're watching your favorite team play in the NCAA tournament. You can be happy as can be one minute, and a few minutes later you can see that they are not going to win and you are not as happy as you were moments ago. Right? It's based on circumstances. Happiness is fleeting. Right? He says joy is something eternal. And since our hearts are made for heaven, in other words, we're made for eternal life, small doses of happiness based on happenstance circumstances won't do. The word joy would more closely capture what you're looking for. Right? So I just kind of think of as happiness as circumstantial and joy as a disposition that is permanent. So no matter what happens to you, you have a deep-seated joy within you. And he uses this story at the beginning to illustrate that, and it's a story of his father having a heart attack. And so if you turn to page 2, his dad's having this heart attack, and his mother says these words in that second paragraph there. My mother looked at me and said, I have no right to complain to God about anything. I'm grateful for the life we've been given. I'm grateful for these 49 years that you've been married to his father. So here's the key line. I could see the deep pain in her eyes, so she was experiencing pain, but there was something deeper, and that something deeper was joy. Then he talks to his dad. His dad asks him to hold his rosary. He puts it against his chest and says, and grins and says, I'm posing for my casket. Making a joke. He calmly said, I'm not worried about a thing. I can see the deep pain in his chest. There was something deeper. And so he uses these kind of words like, the pain was real, a couple lines down, but the joy was realer. The joy overcame the circumstance of pain. And then he goes on to say on the top of page 3, even if you're sitting in an ICU like his dad, it doesn't depend on a change in your circumstance. It depends on a change in you. So we're created for joy, but our circumstances can't steal it away because we're made for it. But if we don't have it, then what has to change is something within us, not something external. So just think about in our culture today how advertisers sell happiness to you. If you buy this, your life will be changed, right? All this kind of stuff, right? Jenny Craig, Nutrisystem. You know, if you do this, if you do that, if you buy the Peloton, if you buy this, and then what are they selling? They're selling happiness, right? And yet we know that just because I buy that bike or I do that program or whatever, that's not going to bring me anything permanent. There may be moments, but it isn't going to change your life. Now, it may change your weight, may change your health, but your life, that's something deeper. And so what he's talking about here is this depth of being. This being will be formed and changed. So on the bottom of page 2, he kind of gives you the formula of what joy is for the Christians. And I use it in sort of a different way than he does. I start with the third one. So joy isn't an absence of pain, it's the presence of Jesus. So what's our source of joy? Well, it's Jesus within us. It's not something out there that we buy or consume or experience, some activity or some person or something. Rather, the joy is within us. It's Jesus himself. Excuse me. And then he goes on to say, with Jesus within us, we know we're loved perfectly. So it isn't about my performance and my accomplishment and my striving for this. It's a gift, right? And Jesus within us loves us perfectly. So knowing that we're loved. Now, in a wonderful study by Andrew Swafford, he says the hardest teaching in the Catholic Church is that the Father loves each of us as much as he loves Jesus. Now, you might sit there and go, Deacon David, where did you get that? I got it from Andrew Swafford. Okay? And I believe it because I think it's great, right? He's saying that as a child of God, we are loved as Jesus is loved by his Father. And for those of us that have multiple children, we get this. Because maybe after the first one, we go, oh, I love this first one, I'll never love the second one. And the second one, oh, I got them the same. And then the third one. And then however many more. And you go, well, I love number 2 more than 6, and 4 more than 3, and 1 more than... No, we don't. We love our children, right? And so God has billions, literally billions, of children that he loves perfectly. Because how could he say this one more than that, right? And a beautiful little representation of that is in the book The Shack, one of my favorite novels, right? Where God keeps telling the main character, Mac, I'm especially fond of Bill. I'm especially fond of Jim. I'm especially fond of Josh. And, Mac's getting kind of tired of this I'm especially fond of business. And he goes, is there anybody you're not especially fond of? And God thinks for it and says, no, can't think of anybody. The moment, right? Where he's especially fond of everyone. So this is the difference between a deist kind of approach to a God who's a supreme being and a personal God that we believe in, that has a personal relationship with Jesus, right? With the Holy Spirit, 3 persons. They have a relationship within the Trinity. That relationship spills over into our relationships with his creation. And he loves us, and he asks us to love each other. Right? So those relationships stem from that initial relationship and then build out. So it's not a surprise that we're called to not just receive the love, but we're called to share that love with each other. Right? Love your neighbor as yourself. And then thirdly, the second one is joy isn't winning, it's when you know you've already won. So this is the feeling that we have, or the belief that we have, of knowing that Christ has already won the victory for us. So when we look at the crucifix, we know that through that saving action, that Christ is our Savior and he has saved us. And he's restored the relationship that was broken by original sin and bringing us back into reconciliation with God, back into relationship with God. So you just kind of remember those 3 things. Okay, so why am I filled with joy? Because Jesus is within me and he is joy. Jesus loves me perfectly and my salvation's already been won. I don't have to earn it. I don't have to do anything. Instead, what I have to do is to not sin gravely, right? We can lose it, but we can never earn it, right? Because it's a gift. This is hard for us Catholics because, by the way, we were taught was faith and works, right? And we focus on that second word, but the Protestants focus more on the first word, the faith part. It's both, but again, we're not earning our salvation through our works. Instead, our works follow our faith. They're not meant to be a transaction where I'll do this, God, for you if you do this for me. So I'll work, you give me salvation. Instead, he's saying, here's salvation. Now, act accordingly, right? Act like you're a child of God. Act with love. But it isn't contingent upon our action. In fact, it's contingent upon us not acting in grave sin, not putting ourselves in grave sin. So we can lose it, and we can't earn it. That makes sense, everybody? That's really important. And for a lot of people that aren't Catholic, they think we are doing all the things we do to earn our salvation. And they can't get it because, like, how you people think about these works. You're earning your salvation. Like, no, we're not. We're just evidencing our faith through our works. We're showing our faith by loving our neighbor. And we don't love our neighbor very well if we don't take action to feed the poor, to give clothing to the needy, to visit the prisoner, to visit the sick. Make sense? So it's those corporal spiritual works of mercy that come through as our actions, but they're meant to be loving actions, not just trying to develop credits in God's ledger. Okay, check that box, check that box, check that box. I'm earning my way. Check, 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 check. Gotta offset those debits. Make sure there's a good balance sheet there, so when I go up there, everything's good. Then it's all about me, and it's not about a gifting, and that's where we mess it up. So those three things are critical. So if you dog ear anything, the bottom of page 2 is, no matter what circumstance you're in, you remind yourself, okay, Jesus is within me, and he is joy itself. Second thing, Jesus loves me perfectly. Right? Third thing, my salvation's already been won. I'm not earning it. I'm receiving this gift. That makes sense? So here I am on the elliptical, my favorite torture machine, and I am not happy. Oh gosh, I've been on this thing for 15 minutes and I got 2 miles to go. Wish I could get off this thing. Now that's the moment, right? If I feel with joy, if you looked at me, you would say, no! That is not a happy guy. In fact, he looks like he's about ready. Right? Am I happy on the outside? No. Am I wishing it was over? Yes. Am I happy when the thing hits 4 miles? Yes. Now, given that, in which we just read on page 2, can you be filled with joy? Can I be filled with joy at those moments? Even when I don't want to be doing what I'm doing? Even when I wish it were over? The answer is yes. Because it's a disposition, right? It's a stance, if you take it that way. And despite the circumstance of pain or discomfort or being a big whining baby, right, I can still have joy within me. You may not see it, but it's there. Right? So this is what he's trying to get at is, it doesn't depend on a change in circumstances. Like, if I get off this elliptical, I will now be joyful. No, I can be joyful on the elliptical. Make sense? So then in the worst circumstances, even there, he said, like this heart attack of his father, you can still have joy. His mother showed him that, his dad showed him that through joking, and he realized that joy is not something dependent on circumstance. It's something deep within us. So with that intro, he asks us to go in the next section on got joy, and he basically says that we all want one thing, and that one thing we want is joy. So all the other circumstances in life are driven toward us achieving joy. And he says, no matter what you say you want, ultimately, that's what you want. Because it's going to bring you joy. So that's his argument from the beginning, that there's an attraction toward it. And he says at the top of page 6, we want to be happy, you want joy, for one reason. And then he goes into how powerful joy is. And he makes a great comment about how we need to have joy to enter into the battles of life. And we've seen this in our life, right, where we experience people that have a joyful disposition, so no matter what tragedy, etc., etc., etc. is happening, somehow or other, they still experience some level of joy, right? They might see something bad, and they might say, well, I'm going to be amazed to see how God works through this. How is God going to bring about a greater good from this apparent evil, right? Because we have this faith and trust in God that we will, the joy is a permanent, has a permanence, and that joy will be brought about. So even on the cross, who would have looked at the cross and thought, hey, there's Jesus, he's a happy man. The Bishop here argues beautifully that he is a happy man, because despite his circumstances at that moment, his disposition of joy, right, came through as, I am doing this, why? Because I love my Father, and I'm following my Father's will, and I'm doing what I came to do. And he was filled with joy, despite all that was going on, because he knew this is what he came for. So if you ever doubt it, oh, I'm having a bad day, I just can't be joyful, then just look at the cross and go, it's not that bad, right? Comparative works for me a lot, and I had to remind myself of having something like it's not that bad, you know. I was playing golf the other day, and I was not playing very well. I was playing with a Protestant minister, and I said something about not playing very well, and he says, it was like 75 and sunny. He goes, it's a beautiful day. It's glorious. And I'm like, I'm going 15 over par. Right? And that's our human nature, right? We're hurting a little bit because our pride's been a little damaged because we're having a bad day. But at the same time, I was reminded, step back, dude. Look at what we're looking at here. It's 75. It's sunny. You're golfing. It's a beautiful day with a friend, you know. Give praise to God. And what am I doing? Well, we should be playing better. So I was reminded, we have to be reminded sometimes by good friends, and maybe even the Protestant minister. Right, not funny. I don't know. So he says, the joy is power, and we have to kind of face life, face these battles, and engage in these battles, because the world can be a very unjoyful surrounding, right? So we are facing difficulties in life. So here's how he says joy is power on page 9. He says, it can make temptations easy to topple, because we're going to prefer spiritual joy over passing pleasures. So we're going to want that deep-seated joy rather than a passing pleasure. So simple example is, do I want to have the joy of receiving the Eucharist on Sunday, or do I want to have the fleeting joy of committing a grave sin before Sunday so I can't receive the Eucharist? That would be a fleeting pleasure, but is it something I'm going to engage in so that I can't receive the Eucharist? No. So we have that power, that want that joy of having God within me. And so it makes temptations easier to topple. Second one, it makes forgiving people easier. He says, because even if they took something from you, you didn't let them take the one thing that matters. So despite something that they may have done to you, they can't take away your joy. They can't. So we always have that power of joy. Third, it makes it easy to pursue dreams, because failures can't crush a joyful person, even lousy putting and lousy golf swing, right? It can't topple, all right, joy, because circumstances aren't greater than the joy. Joy will win out over the circumstance. Fourth one, it makes you a natural leader and faith sharer. It makes you magnetic and attractive, and people want to follow your lead when they are around you. Well, there's an example with Father Michael, right? Joyfully sharing his faith, and when you're around him, you want to follow that lead. You want to find, wow, what's he on? What is that thing that he's on? Because I want that. I want that joy. Next one, joy makes your setbacks setups for comebacks. They give you the right perspective to face challenges. So when we fall down and we do have a setback, we have a setup for a comeback, right? So not that I ever had a circumstance like this with my wife, but with old girlfriends, I remember having like these fights. We would never fight. Right? And we'd have these little fights, and then we'd make up. Remember? Remember what making up was like? It was better than the fight, right? So you're like, well, that was a bad thing, but I'm going to make up. It's going to be better. So it's like that. It's like, I know it's a moment, it's a setback, but I know that there's going to be joy. It's a setup for a comeback. It's a setup for making up in some way. Next one's kind of interesting.
It's not a very good example.
Well, it was for me.
That was fleeting happiness.
Yes, I know. Well, it is setting you up. Yeah, it's setting you up for a comeback. That's the idea. So you don't stay there. You don't stay in despair. It isn't bad.
Obviously free because it ended.
Yeah. It's hard when she's always right all the time. I think there's mass in a few minutes. Joy even helps you get more done at work. This is the next one. And this is a great one. It talks about, they did studies on people, and they found that happy people aren't just more productive, but they also receive higher evaluations for their work, dependability, and creativity. And it also found that students who were more cheerful in college were more financially successful than their peers over a decade after graduation. So just think about that. People at work, happy people, joyful people, okay? They're going to perform better. College students, they're going to earn better. Next one, he talks about how it affects your physical health. And he's saying they did this over 75 years with 268 students. They found out that good things are nice, but joy is better. So they were looking at, if someone was joyful in their 50s, they would be a better predictor than cholesterol of whether they'd be alive and happy at 80. So he comments there toward the bottom of that bullet. So fire up a grill, he did those bacon-covered burgers. In moderation, of course. Okay. But the key there is that if you have that disposition, physically, you're going to be healthy. So I kid with my internist, Dr. Bob Alley, and he always says, I never worry about you because of your faith. And I think, okay. Because he knows that the people he sees, day in and day out, there's a difference between people that have that, I'll call it joyful disposition, versus those people that come in despairing and hopeless and depressed, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. He knows that their health suffers from those things, and ours that have that joyfulness, we are less likely. Doesn't just mean you can do whatever you want, but so he said in moderation, of course, on birth. Right? So that can make a difference, our disposition of our health. And then the last one is it makes us it says a force for good in the world. And so we don't just stay there within ourselves and say, I'm joyful. That disposition is meant to move out, right, and to share our joy. So we don't just close in on ourselves. Where it's more likely for people that are having a lack of joy to close in on themselves, kind of cave in on themselves, and be alone, and feeling, that way where the joyfulness really, Bishop Aaron says, the good is diffusive of itself. It can't be contained in a sense. It has to be spread. So, he says, next, so misery can be contagious, and if we've been around miserable people, we kind of know they can spread misery to other people sometimes. He says, joy is equally contagious and leads to a better world. And he says, then we have to have this joy again to fight the battles. And then he specifically mentions how the devil wants to rob us of our joy. So one of my little methods here, and this may be a Deacon David like psychotic method of convincing myself of something, but I love to compete. Okay? So one thing that makes me do better is to make it a competition between me and the devil. Right? Because I'm not going to compete with God, because then I know I'm in trouble. I think you're not going to win, right? But I can beat the devil. Right? So the devil's trying to rob me of my joy. I'm like, you're not going to me today, devil. You're not going to do that. All right? So about 2-3 weeks ago, Chris was in the house, and she could hear me in the kitchen just swearing and being mad as heck. And I had just bought a reload of peppercorns for my pepper shaker. Right? And, you save about 60 cents when you do this. So I did it, I reloaded it, and then I turned the thing upside down to do the twist thing, and about 300 peppercorns landed on my eggs. And they were nice and wet, moist, sunny side up eggs, and these 300 peppercorns just landed there. That was at least 65 cents. So I had to finish it. And I looked at this thing, and I was so angry because I just didn't touch it enough. And now I ruined my breakfast, and I am just PO'd at myself for being so stupid. You know how you go through the cycle of, I'm so stupid, why did I do this, why this? Now I'm on my breakfast, blah, 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 blah. So I just unloaded that. Explosions happen out in the kitchen, right? Next morning, exact same thing happens. Exact same thing. I turn that sucker over. This is after I tightened it in my own mind. Unless you loosened it. Did you loosen it on that? Anyway, I tightened it in my own mind, but I didn't. You got a good excuse.
I think
That's fine. No, it's not your sort of suspicious. You protest too much. Anyway, so I literally do this thing, and another 300 peppercorns just falls right onto the plate. And I'm just looking at this in absolute disbelief that I have done this now, back to back. I mean, it's like, what happened one time is sort of think, okay. The second time, now, normally, this would really cause it a lot worse, right? But instead, I thought, I'm not going to do what I did yesterday. I'm just going to take a deep breath, and I'm just going to clean it up the best I can. And I'm going to scrape it off, and I'm going to finish my breakfast. And there were a few peppercorns underneath things. I just thought, don't get them right now. I gotta go to church. I don't want to be late for mass. Just let them sit there. I'll get them when I get home. And it was a totally different reaction, right? Now, what's going on there, right? Well, after I had my eruption on the first day, I didn't react as a person that was full of joy. In fact, I reacted like someone that looked in. And again, the circumstance is there. Now, do you have the power to kind of fight over it and be the person God called you to be, or do you kind of give in to the devil who's trying to, I think, unscrew my top of my container just to get to me and see if I can have a second blow up, right? Now, the devil didn't really do that. I just didn't turn it on. But the point is, if I make it a competition, like, I'm not going to fail. I'm not going to let this peppercorn shaker win, even though I obviously did. This peppercorn shaker. And now I'm up to over a fucking loss. This is serious. But it's interesting how, so if it helps you, you know, I'm not getting into you, devil. I'm not going to go there. You know, I'm not going to, just not going to. So 4 days of golf last week, I had moments where I just had to say, I'm not throwing that club. I am not throwing it. I wanted to throw it. I'm not throwing it. I'm not going to say, oh, whatever. I'm not going to say that's where. I'm just not. I'm not doing that. You know? And it's just a conscious choice of saying, I'm not going to give in. Because what the devil does, I think, is he tries to rob us of our joy through the circumstances of life. We're going nice, and then bad traffic, or something, our team loses, or our boss says something, and we just kind of can go like this all day long, right? They said, don't let the devil rob you of your joy. Don't let the circumstances of life overtake you. So you're in a battle, and engage in it, and fight through it. So he goes on at the bottom of page 12 to call this joy. We should work for a constant spiritual disposition of joy and a receptivity to and delight in the reality, and eventually the ultimate reality of God. So this is where we, as my Protestant minister says, what a beautiful day God has given us, right? It's this weather, it's this scenery, it's the blue sky, it's friendship, it's fun, not some other thing that I was dwelling on. It's that constant disposition of joy and then delighting in God, in God's creation. Right? When he tells us, and at the top of that page, in the 5th line, he says, if you read this with a skewed idea that you have to feel happy all the time, that's not what this is. So you already have circumstances that make you very unhappy. That's okay. You already have things that make you sad. You are going to grieve. You are going to have negative things in your life. What is untouchable is that disposition of joy. Okay. Circumstances bad, feelings bad, but not the disposition. That makes sense? It does not depend on the circumstance. Okay, that's what he's trying to tell us. So on 13, he gives us some disclaimers, and he says, the first disclaimer is, you need to measure your norm, which is kind of funny, but the idea is about changing your thinking. And he says, if you lack joy, don't try to change your life circumstances. How many people know this phrase in their mind about trying to make themselves happy or trying to make someone else happy? Right? Like I want to make you happy, or I want to make myself happy. So I'm going to do this thing to make myself happy. And he's saying, it isn't about changing your circumstances. The biggest obstacle between you and joy is yourself. It's your being, not the circumstances around you. So you can take yourself to all the right places, like your happy place, but it may not bring you any joy. Okay? The only way you have that joy is deep within you, not changing your circumstances. So that's his first point. And then he says, but too often we blame our circumstances on a lack of joy. So on the top of page 14, and you can put the word joyful anywhere. He uses words like peaceful and confident and happy. But he's saying, this will happen when my teenager starts respecting me. Don't hold your breath. I'll be this when I'm promoted, when I'm the CEO or something. I'll be happy when my wife starts treating me right. I'll be happy when I make enough money. I'll be happy when. And his point is that no, you're only going to be joyful when you change, not your circumstances. And so that's the thrust of the whole book. Is you need to work on this within, not externally hoping that something happens to you that will change you, but rather you change from within. So then from there, you go back to the table of contents for a second, which is right at the beginning of the book. He gives us 9 rules. And rule 1 through rule 9 are all things he says Jesus did, and he'll explain at the very end. Of course, Jesus asks us to share in his joy. So just going right down the list. We're supposed to give thanks, practice silence, we're supposed to love ourselves, we're supposed to have fun, engage our bodies in the battle for joy, make friends, rest, serve, and train our mind with faith. And so I'll spend just a few minutes on each one of these. But if you have any questions as I kind of go along, or comments, just jump right in and say, I got a comment on that one. How exactly does that serve, me maintaining or improving my disposition of joy? Everybody good? Any questions so far? Yeah.
So, I guess I'm kind of confused on how to define joy.
Okay.
Yeah, how would you think about it?
Well, a lot of people have different words for it. So one word that I hear is peace or contentedness, right? The absence of conflict, the absence of despair, those kind of things. And that's a way to describe it, right? One way that I think is probably the best way to describe it is it's not solely a human thing. We can't experience joy alone. We can only experience joy with God. So as God's our creator, then the only time we're deeply fulfilled is in some way through our relationship with God. So I might have kind of a secular, think that way, kind of happiness, but I really don't have that deep-seated joy unless I'm in a relationship with God. So I would just argue that people that have no relationship with God, an atheist, an agnostic, someone who can't really have joy, they're dependent upon circumstances of the world, not on God. So that's one way I would say differentiate. So I would say you can't really have joy without God, because God is the source of that joy. And so without the source, we can't have it.
Right.
And so when we go back to that first point, the Jesus within us is our joy. Now, obviously, if I shut Jesus out by not believing or not knowing or through grave sin, then I can't really have joy because Jesus is not within me. Does that help you?
I think so.
So it wouldn't be something I can do by myself. It's only through God that I would be able to fully experience it. Yeah, please.
I think Matthew Kelly has a way of expressing joy is you collaborate with God.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. It's not done alone, right? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I would say that you're looking at a feeling within you that no matter what's going on, everything's going to be all right because God's in charge.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you go back to, and like when we did the Mindful Catholic book, that was kind of one of the points of the book was we have to believe that everything's going to be okay because we trust in God's goodness and that God will bring about a greater good than whatever momentary circumstances are causing us, whether they're evil or we're in momentary despair or whatever, but we have this trust and faith in God that everything will be okay in the end. So it's like the victory's been won, I'm going to end up in heaven, I'm going to be a saint in heaven. So all the detours along the way that take me off that path, right? We may be off it, but that's not where we're ending up. So we can tolerate much differently, knowing that there's just moments, not permanence. Yeah. Any other questions? Good question. So let's look at rule number 1, give thanks. And he says at the beginning on page 19, our first rule is so powerful, I consider writing a whole book just on this. Maybe you will. But he says this is just so important because grateful people are joyful. And he gives the listing on page 21 and 22 of things that show the power of gratitude. So just a couple of them if you want. If you can look at any of these you want. But one of them is an interesting one is the fourth one. That gratefulness releases oxytocin and dopamine in the brain, the all-natural feel-good chemicals. So one thing he's going to point out throughout the book is the relationship between your body and your mind. And so when we feel things, it affects our brain. When we think things, it affects our body. Right? So when we are grateful, it actually has a chemical effect on us. And it releases these chemicals that make us feel good. Okay, that's one. And then he talks about, on the contrary, ingratitude is a poison. So what does ingratitude do sometimes? Well, sometimes it keeps us from enjoying the blessings that God's given us. But I'm not grateful. And it can destroy friendships, marriages, etc., etc. So he's giving us a couple of examples of what gratefulness positively can do and ungratefulness can't do. And And then he wants to make sure that we realize that it may not come naturally to us. So if you've been around people in the workplace that are kind of miserable, you've heard the phrase misery loves company, right? And you know a few bad apples can make the whole department kind of miserable, because they're down and they bring everyone else down. And then you have a few people that may be joyful and they may bring people up. But over time, if these kind of people in despair, they can bring other people down. And he's saying, so sometimes it's really hard for us, and that's why it is a battle. This isn't just come easily. It can be a battle. And he says sometimes it's like a caveman survival mechanism. It might be natural to band together with people that are miserable. Try to identify with them. And he's saying that is where we have to rise above it by allowing God within us to rise above it. We don't take it on by ourselves. So he uses St. Paul, and he calls it Paul's secret sauce. And he talks about, Paul's struggles. And in that paragraph on 25, 3 times I've been beaten with rods, once I was stoned, 3 times shipwrecked. He gives us all these things Paul's dealing with. And then he talks about Paul's joy. And on page 26, about the 4th paragraph down from prison, he writes, rejoice in the Lord always. Rejoice. Be thankful. So he talks about how Paul turns lemons into lemonade on page 27. Every struggle for Paul is turned on its head. You can't murder Paul, you can make him a martyr. So the negative, Paul's going to make it a positive. You could imprison Paul, but you could shift his ministry from traveling evangelist to writer. So think about the great gifts that Paul gave us through his writings. If he'd never been put in prison, he would have never written that. So again, they give him lemonade out of lemons. You couldn't offend Paul, you would only give him an opportunity to forgive somebody. You couldn't starve Paul, you could make him fast better. I love that one. You couldn't put Paul on trial, but rather you give him a pulpit to preach for the world's judgment. So every circumstance, he would shift away from despair or hope or spiritual joy. And he would turn that struggle, so he would battle through it. Then we use the example of people in Haiti. We don't go into that whole thing, but how grateful the people are. And one thing we experienced when I was at Sacred Heart was people would go down to Haiti. To a person, they would say, I thought I was going to minister to them. I realized when I was down there that the Haitian people were ministering to me. I was the one getting the gifts. I was giving them my medical expertise. I was giving them, whatever I could help them with. But I got the greater gift. I got to experience love, their faith, their hope, their trust in God. All those kind of important things. Not the temporal thing that they were getting. They were giving a temporal aid, right? But not a spiritual, sustaining, kind of life-giving thing. They use Anne Frank as an example of this. Then he says a great line on 32. He says in the 3rd paragraph, gratitude might not change your circumstance, but it does change you. So if you can be grateful in a circumstance, that is the way to express your joy. So he's saying it does have power. But when we are grateful, it does have power to express that joy. And if we practice ingratitude all the time, because of all the circumstances, then we're not behaving with joy. Like we're probably behaving with despair. So it does affect us. So he's saying, if you want to be really good at being joyful, be grateful. An ungrateful person won't be as joyful. Does that make sense? So work on gratitude, you'll increase your joy. It's kind of this recipe here. Okay, let's jump to page 38. And I guess I'm the poster child for this one, but it has to do with when you're in traffic. Now, many of us, we think about when we are despairing. Traffic, you just heard yourself giggle, right? Traffic in the world is that you can have a pretty good day until we hit I-40 or Kingston Pike or wherever. And now all of a sudden, we have this battle, right? And he says, every time you're in road, I want to challenge you to give thanks and praise to God. When I'm in traffic, he says, I never wave with one finger. My goal is you cut me off, I'll raise all 5 fingers and lift my hand in praise. Okay? So his point is, when we have these moments, and they're just moments, we can treat them one way or we can treat them another. And he's saying, if you can treat them by giving Thanks and praise to God in that moment. So, go back to my golf game. I just messed up that hole. Give thanks and praise to God that I'm out here golfing, right? I have 2 arms and 2 legs that function. I can swing a club. I can play. It's a nice day. See what I mean? Not oh, poor me, I missed that shot. Well, what do you do? Big picture. Be thankful, be thankful, be thankful. So he's saying that's how we increase our joy, is by saying thank you to God often. And Bible 40 is a warning to us. Stop overlooking your daily blessings. Don't take things for granted, right? Be grateful for your friends, your family, good meal, a pretty sunset. Okay? Be sure to cash in with 2 magic words, thank you. So that's the first rule of living joy, is be grateful. And like I said, I can just write the whole book on that. But there's more. There's 8 more to go. All right, I'm going to check my time real quick. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I've got half done.
Yeah.
All right. Do you guys want to take 5 minutes? Let's do that. So let's read into 10 and 7, okay? And that way you guys can have a little bathroom break, or you can have a mental break. have a drink. Is there anything out there to drink?
It's coffee.
Get coffee. I'm going to refresh your coffee or have a little water or something. And then we'll go through the next 8 rules, okay? All right. You can't wait. Right now we're on rules 2 through 9, okay? So these, I'm not going to go through the details of every page here because we'll never finish, but these are just kind of some basic rules to go through, okay? So the first one is practicing silence, right? And he's saying right away that our culture robs us of this by a culture of constant noise and distraction. And not only robs us of our joy, but it makes us miserable. So he's talking about how our culture really has declared a war on silence, and particularly the devil doing that. And so he tells us in a way how the devil uses these particular weapons in our culture. And the first one is the temptation, you shall be all-knowing. Now this is kind of comical in a way, because you go back to the Garden of Eden, what were Adam and Eve tempted by? The knowledge of good and evil, right? That they could think or know good from evil, think like the gods. So you shall be all-knowing. And he says this is really interesting, and particularly for young people like Josh, he says. These younger people, they have a tendency to think that they can find everything in their phone, right? I can Google anything. And they're not wrong on lots and lots of things, right? I mean, if you want to learn how to do something, it's a wonderful place to go to, watch a YouTube video, learn facts about things. But he says what they sometimes don't do is they don't use the experience of people that have experience that are older and counsel with them. So he says it like this, in that second full paragraph, or first full paragraph, millennials, right? He says, they have a well-documented sad tendency to disregard what older generations think. Go down the 4 lines. No one can tell them anything they can't find with a quick Google search, and that creates a certain attitude in people. Like, I will research this better. So I'll give you an example. You got a young mom, new baby. Young mom, instead of asking her mom, who's got experience being a mom, I'll just Google it. Well, there's nothing wrong with Googling it and consulting with your mom. It's when you exclude mom, right? Because Google must know better than experience of people that have experience. And he says, so we have this problem of trying to be all-knowing. And then he says, we sometimes also fail at being all-powerful. This is the bottom of 46. We try to over-experience things, and we miss the experience itself. Okay? So if you try to do too much, you miss the main experience. Does that make sense? So I'll give you a simple example of math, right? If I try to take all of math in and do everything right, all of math, I'm going to be so preoccupied with doing everything right that I'm going to forget why I'm there, right? Oh, I got to make sure I kneel right, and I hold my hands right, and I got to stand right. And I'm trying to do everything just perfect, and then the math, it was perfect today at math. What was the comment about? I don't know. I was sitting really good though. I said we can get distracted by trying to do everything. So he's saying, don't try to fully experience things to the point where you over-experience it and you miss the main moment. That's what he's getting at. You can miss your moment because you're crowded out with the noise of overwhelming information. you're overdoing, you're over-experiencing it. So he's just giving us a caution. You can't know everything about everything. Make sure you stay focused and know what you're supposed to know. Experience the moment you're supposed to experience. Right? So Father's raising up the challenge, going, yes, I remember St. Thomas Aquinas' his theory of transubstantiation, and I remember, right? And we're doing all that stuff, and we're like, uh-oh, where am I? Oh, we're on the Our Father. Right? I missed all the rest of the prayers, because I went somewhere else to fully experience that transubstantiation. See what I mean? So he's saying, just be careful you don't try to over-experience things. That's his all-knowing caution. Then you shall be all doing, the constant activity we have in our culture. And he says, and this has a lot to do with multitasking. And this is going to really upset a couple people in here, I'm sure, because he's saying multitasking causes us to do more things, but more things less well. So it's in that middle paragraph. We only have so much mental bandwidth, and it means that the more things you do, the less you do each thing well. Make sense? So I did this mindfulness thing with Gene and Jim in the book we did, and it was trying to brush your teeth and being present to brushing your teeth. All right? So I'm going to brush my teeth perfectly. So I got my toothbrush, and I put my toothpaste on there, and I remember I had to take my rinse, and I gargle, and you're supposed to sense all your senses. So I'm going to sense the taste of the scope. It's minty. And then I feel it swishing between my teeth, and I'm moving it around, and I feel it, and what it's doing, tingling, and a little alcohol in there, maybe got a little something on my tongue, and I felt that little burn, and felt that. And I'm feeling it all before I'm ready to brush my teeth, and I'm going to be fully in the moment. And the next thing I remember is I take my toothbrush and I put it away. Because I had brushed my teeth without thinking for any moment, the whole time I was brushing my teeth, that I was actually brushing my teeth. I went somewhere else. Right? We do it all the time. How many times have we gotten somewhere and we went, oh, I'm here? Like, how many green lights did you have? I don't know. Red lights? I don't know. Which way did you go? I'm not sure. And you want to see traffic around there? No. How fast were you? I don't know. Because we're just on autopilot. We shut everything out, and we just end up being somewhere. Or how many ends, and what are we talking about? I don't know. But I know I got to stop at Target on the way home, and I got to get this, and I got to get this, and I got to get this, because we left the moment, and we started thinking about something else. So his point is, when we try to do more than one thing, we don't do anything very well. And then he has this other thing, which I think is great, called attention residue. It's in this first full paragraph of 49. And he says, when we're giving our attention to something, and we're fully engaged in it, if we mentally engage in another activity, or we get interrupted, to previously return to where we were, he says, it can take up to 20 minutes to fully engage back to where we were. So you're reading a book.
Maybe for some of those older folks, it might take longer.
Yeah, that's what you're doing. Yeah. But you're reading something, you're right in the middle of something, you're reading it, and then the phone rings, and you get in this conversation, and you come back to the book. His argument is it's going to take you a while to get back to where you were in the book. It's going to take you a while to get your mind back to where it was. And so constant interruptions, constant noise, constant, distractions mess you up. So he's saying we have to be joyful, we have to have some silence there. We can't just get getting bombarded by noise all the time. He gives a great example at the bottom of the page. More tragically, he says, from fourth line, there are families who never really develop relations with each other because mom and dad check work emails every 30 minutes and the kids check social media every 30 seconds. So try to have a conversation with someone who's doing this, right? Or every so many minutes, picking up the phone, or every so many minutes, jumping on the computer. Try to have that conversation. Not going to happen. So it's one of those things he says. Then he goes into talking about phones. He talks about Snapchat and what it tries to do by getting kids to go on it all the time. But his argument is really on 51. He talks about how phones can really mess us up. And he says it beautifully. He says, about 10 lines down on 51, look for the word so. right after the parentheses. The phone that should be connecting people now disconnects people, like you from your team, with constant quote unquote break-in conversations. And it's become a source of anxiety in your teenager's pocket. The smartphone doesn't work for him, he works for a smartphone. So we're these slaves to our phones. So, like, you know, we're talking to somebody, and we're in the middle of a conversation at dinner, and our phone goes off. And what do we do? No. What just happened? This is more important than you. That's what we just told them. Without telling them, that's what we told them, right? Without meaning to tell them that, that's what we just did. And so right away, who works for who? We become slaves to this type of thing. And it beckons us, and we go, stop what I'm doing. I gotta respond to my slave driver, right? And it cracks me up. I mean, I'm out saying, you know, have a good day to people at the end of Mass, and I have people walk by me going like this. Have a good day. What's going on with you people? You know, come on. Can't you wait till you got to church? Now, if it's an emergency, I get it. And sometimes they are. And that's why the phone's with them, because they want to respond to an emergency, you know. But that's like an emergency every time, you know. And don't pick on people who use their phones in church because they're looking at the gospel and all that. That's fine. Not as big on the phone. But when it becomes something we work for instead of using it as a tool, then we've kind of lost the silence because it just intrudes into our silence. That's his point. So he also gives some statistics that are really sad on page 51 and 52. I won't get through all of them, but it talks about how in our current culture, how many distractions students have and young people have. The second point on 52, suicide rates are 46% higher in 8 years from 2007 to 2015. He's talking about how people that, the data study near the bottom here, how many people, if they went off of Facebook, they're less lonely, they're less depressed, and they're happier. 2016, more than half of incoming college freshmen described their own mental health as below average. Can you imagine? Now, Jim, you were teaching veterinary school for years. Can you imagine if over half of your students every year walk in the door saying, my mental health is below average?
I'm sure there's some said that.
Yeah.
10 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But this went over 50% for the first time in 2016. Yeah.
So to say one of the things Kelly and I do when we go out to dinner is to see how many other couples are paying attention to the person they're with.
Yeah.
Or not. Almost 100%.
Yeah, and how many of them have both phones out?
Yeah, they both do.
Yeah.
And they're both.
Yeah. And it affects your mental health, right? I mean, that's what this is getting at, is we've become indoctrinated by this thing.
I remember one time when I was sitting in an airport terminal, and I looked around, and literally every single person in the terminal waiting for the gate was looking at their phone, myself included, but
still. I mean, so silence, like you're talking about here, silence is golden, but we're not experiencing golden. We're experiencing our attachment to this thing, you know.
Yeah.
So anyway, so he makes the argument that silence is where we experience God. It's beautiful. It's where the soil grows and so on. And it's where we become grateful. So that section on 55, we're grateful and we have that state of mind and heart when we can have some silence. But if we're just constantly bam, 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 always in the activity, we never take the time to be grateful. We never have the silence to be grateful. So let me go to bottom of 61. Put limits on your screen time. The average American spends 7 hours a day looking at screens. 7 hours. 30 years ago, we spent no hours because we didn't have a phone and we didn't have a computer at our home, right? Maybe there was a big computer at work that we put punch cards into, or we type into, or something. Remember CC mail and things like that, or we faxed or something. But today, it's all 24/7. this baby's brighter side. And so, he talks about 7 hours a day. The average adult, second line there, consumes 5 times more information than their counterpart did 50 years ago. We are just bombarded with knowledge. Somebody in class the other day said, yeah, I had to find out about that Gwyneth Paltrow skiing accident. I had to check that website out. That story. What? The skiing accident? The trial, right?
That was 8 years ago.
Yeah. And it's news. Breaking news. Gwyneth Paltrow. Right? I mean, we are just inundated with information that isn't necessary, nor do we need it to indulge in it, but it's there. Breaking news. One after the other. So it's good in one respect, but then we can get stimulated and we don't rest. So his recommendation is on page 63, try to rest your mind from screens 1 day a week and make it Sunday. Now, that may seem too much, so if that seems too much, then just do it for a period. If you say, okay, I'm not going to look at my computer or my phone from the time I wake up till lunchtime. Or I'm not going to look at my phone from lunchtime to dinner time, or whatever. But get a practice going where you start saying, I'm not going to do this. So I'm out playing golf and I turn my phone off. So, if all hell's breaking loose back at home, my poor wife is not going to get me because my phone's off. Because I'm golfing. I have spoken, right? My buddies are playing golf. You know what they're doing? I'm like, are you playing? Yeah, just a minute. Phone ring, yep. I'm like, what is going on? Now, I love John McGillicuddy. Dr. John, he's in here a lot. Dr. John on his phone the whole time he's golfing. Now, he's a doctor. So guess what he's doing? Being a doctor. I get it. Sometimes you have to do that kind of stuff. But a lot of stuff that I see out there has nothing to do with necessary. It just has to do with, I'm a slave to this sucker. And when that thing rings, I answer. So it's nice sometimes when we leave our phone by accident at home and we can't have it work with us. We go, today, put my phone home. And then, have an answer to it. Right? So this is kind of a big deal. So he wants to make sure we kind of get the idea we're spending way too much time on that kind of stuff and try to cut it down. And he even recommends on top page 64 that we find a friend to keep you accountable. So like spouse, friend, just say, I'm going to be accountable to you. I'm only going to spend this much time. If that helps you. All right, number 3, love yourself.
Can I mention something?
Yes, you can.
I'll make it fast. One of the things too that he says, it's just really small thing, is he says like, catch yourself in just those moments where you have downtime, like in a doctor's office or the airport or standing in line, where a lot of times we'll pull out the phone and check email or whatever. Just not to do it.
Yeah.
Create those small moments of time where you're used to filling your mind with stuff, and just to resist the temptation for like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And just to, give yourself that moment of silence and just to create discipline that way.
Yeah, or actually, like in your car, don't turn on the radio, or when you're home, don't necessarily turn on the TV set, or don't turn on music. Just as best you can, try to create moments of silence. It's kind of his argument. Okay, so number 3 is love yourself, and he's giving us some ideas about how we do this. And this is kind of simple, but he wants to make sure we see ourselves the way God sees us, and we have to be able to speak truth to ourselves as to who we are. So it's kind of a simple idea, but the main thing is recognizing I'm a child of God, and I am not what I do. I am a lovable person, and seeing yourself rightly. And we're God's lights. We're meant to be lovable and amazing, as he says. Right? So that's kind of the main thing is just see yourself positively, and that can, and through the eyes of God. How would God see me? Right? So I see myself as the sum of all my failures and my weaknesses and my sins and my negatives. And God sees me as his beloved child, whom he loves preciously, infinitely, perfectly. And I see myself as, I'm like garbage, I'm lousy, I'm this. No, you're not. So he said, you have to see yourself as lovable. See yourself through God's eyes. Okay. See, we can go fast through some of these. Okay,
Can I interject?
You can.
Sorry. That again is something where you're
Mhm.
tells you that you're not enough, tells you that you need this, that,
Mhm.
and the other thing because you're a failure.
Yeah.
And all of the fun and everything you read and you look at also
Yeah.
tells you the opposite.
Yeah. So it's the constant, you can do better, you're not good enough. Kind of thing, yeah. First one is have fun, and he doesn't have a whole lot of comments, but what he's trying to do is, he's saying, don't take everything so seriously, and just have fun. And so, where I struggle with this one, I'll just be honest, I said I like to compete. Well, competition for me is fun. Losing is not fun. Alright? Anybody with me on this stuff? So I can have fun playing a game if I win. If you want to play a game and have fun and I suck at it and you're going to beat me, that stops being fun. Okay? So it's hard for people like me to just say, oh, have fun. Well, you got to be careful what you're doing to have fun. Because if having fun is competing, then I have to win. Well, that's not going to happen 50% of the time on average, right? So having fun can be tricky. So he's just pointing out, don't take yourself so seriously. It's a game. Well, not to me. Don't take it so seriously, Make sense? But that's hard for some of us because we do take it seriously. And we gotta think, just don't take it so seriously. If I'm having my bad day of golf and my Protestant minister friend says, it's a beautiful, glorious day. And I'm going, you're right, I'm stupid. Because I'm dwelling on how poorly I'm playing. See what I mean? So it's going back to, can you have fun? Yes. But again, you have to not think stupidly. But fun is dependent upon how you play. Fun is dependent upon seeing it properly, right? Which is seeing it as a beautiful day, out with friends, and so he's saying just don't take everything so seriously. Rule number 5: engage your body in the battle for joy. And he makes a comment about smile more on page 93. One of the little great sentences in the book on page 93 is in a one-line paragraph. In short, he is risen, tell your face. It's the best news in human history. It should shine on our faces, So again, going back to that, if I know that God is present within me, I'm loved perfectly, and my salvation's been won, I should be joyful, right? Tell your face, smile, Again, great examples of us like a Father Michael. That's contagious. Smiling makes other people smile. Okay? So that's a simple thing, but an important thing we can do with other people is, and then he also talks about self-care in here, about make your body an offering and sleep. And so one way that we engage our body well is to take good care of it. So obviously, if I do not take good care of myself, my disposition for joy is going to be lessened because I'm depressed and I'm miserable and I'm sad and I'm this and that. And Chris, I always have this funny thing about exercise. Where she likes to exercise, I like when exercise is fun. Okay, so when I go home, if I do the mistake of saying, I'm going to eat lunch and then I'm going to watch TV, and then I'm going to take a power nap, and then I'm going to feel like exercising, good luck. Because once you're on that couch and you're watching that TV, your energy is being drained, and you do not want to get up off that couch and go exercise. So the smart way for me to do is go. Just go and do it. And the days you feel like not doing it, those are the days you really gotta fight and get over there and do it. And then you walk out and you go, yes, I did it, right? Joy. When I'm on the couch and it's 3:30, I haven't gone yet. I don't want to go. I need to go. I know you need to go, but I don't want to go. Right? If I went at 1:30, I wouldn't be doing this at 3:30. But we convince ourselves, I need to rest. Engage your body. Get in the gym. Because when you walk out, are you uplifted from exercise or drained? Uplifted mostly. Now there are people who get drained, but I don't. I don't work hard enough. But uplifted, right? I feel good about getting my heart rate up, and things are good. Yeah. So engage your body. And also make sure you sleep. That's it. Sleep is a weapon, as he said. Okay, number 6, make friends. There's social engagement. So this can be a huge thing. He wants to make sure we weren't put on earth to be alone. We were made to love our neighbor, and we're made to be in relationship with God and with neighbors. So he's saying God gives you all these gifts and they bring you joy. So make sure you engage in real friendships. And he says on page 109, be intimate. He's not talking about sex. He's talking about real friendship. Don't be a lonely friend. Be an active, engaged friend. Be close to people. And he makes the point about when someone asks, "How are you?" They may be asking, "How are you really doing?" And be engaged with that. Don't just ask them. Really ask them, "How's it going? What's going on in your life?" kind of thing. And be interested. So that's a good idea. Just having good friends that brings us joy. Number 7 is rest. And he particularly talks about the need for the Sabbath, the need for rest. And he talks about the importance of rest and how we need that to be joyful, because if we're wearing ourselves out and we're not recharging our batteries, then we're going to lose it and not be happy. So he says we have to wage war on work. So on page 124, he says 1 day a week, you got to stop working so hard. And again, this comes to things like not being on your phone all the time during your days off, not spending your Sabbath day doing all the things around the house you haven't done all week. Carve out time to rest. This is his argument. And he says at the bottom of 127, stop and smell the roses, taste your food. I mean, we know this one. How many people eat to live versus live to eat? Like, some people just what? They want to get it over with. And like, okay, I got 3 minutes for lunch. Boom, I'm going to do the fast food thing. And it's over with. He's saying, taste your food. Enjoy the gifts God's given you, right? And really relish food. Enjoy. Taste your food. And he says how tragic it is, right? When we just wolf down food just to sustain ourselves. Because it's a gift from God. And wants us to kind of, just be resting in meals. Don't make them like that. But slow down. Enjoy your meal. This is advice. Number 8 is serving. To serve. And again, this is all about thinking about the other person, not about yourself. He has a great line on 139. Friday Above Service is a remedy. It says, service corrects and directs our desires. So as a young person, we probably weren't as much into service. As we've gotten older, we've begun realizing life is not all about me. It's about serving others and loving others, becoming other-centered. And he says, if you want to be joyful, service can correct and direct your desire, because now you're being other-centered. You're directing your activity outward. It's not all about you. It's about loving your neighbor as yourself. It's about loving God. So serving the other brings you tremendous joy. And I think that's about all I'll say about that. And then we're up to, good, we're doing good. Okay. Another one I loved was number 3 on page 149, give money away. They're asking people about what makes you happier, making more money and keeping more money, or giving money away. And it says, they did a study of 632 Americans there in that bottom paragraph. They asked them to rate their happiness. Income level, he says, didn't matter in the survey. Those who spent money on themselves weren't happier, but those who gave it away were. So, simple, recipe for happiness is share, be generous, give things away, and it'll bring you joy. So, another way to do it. Last one, probably the second most important one of all, because we started with being grateful. This, I think, is the second most important. It's framing your mind with faith. And here he's trying to say we have to have a frame through which we see the world. So it's like a worldview. And he's at the bottom of 153, he says, the most powerful joy-inducing frame your mind can have is one that's formed by faith. Because faith is the way you see everything. It shapes your big picture of life. And if the frame is a cause for joy, he says, then I can be joyful even when it's difficult. So he wants to see how we see it into a frame of mind. Right? And so, he explains it on how you frame things. And he uses the same Paul to give his example of this prisoner who frames things and again, how he saw it. Remember, what was our enemy? And so he asked questions at the top of 160. You know, do you see certain things in life a certain way? And he says, there can be a better thing in life than seeing it the way you might see it. So his whole point is, do you see things through the eyes of faith? So I'll give you some examples. We were doing a study on the fourth quarter, and they asked me about celebrations, and I wrote down the funerals of my mom, my dad, and my brother. I asked anybody else in the class, did anybody else put down a funeral mass? And I think that was the only one. You remember that? Okay, how about you, Gene? Do you remember what said that?
No.
So they're looking at me, and I'm like, well, why would that be a celebration? Right? A funeral mass for my mom and my dad and my brother. Now, most people would be grieving and being sad, and I'm a smiling, happy deacon going, this is great. My brother was sad. And my things were like, and what's the on? But what I was on was faith, right? So with faith, we see things differently. I look at it as he transitions from a person suffering from melanoma and painful cancer to a person who's now free of that human distress and is now free and hopefully in heaven, right? Where it can be where we're destined to go and not be suffering with this human ordeal of cancer. Same with my mom and dad. My dad's going through dementia, my mom's going through lymphoma. I'm happy. Now, I'm not happy when a little kid dies or something because that's tragic and people die in the before they're supposed to. But when you look at the big picture, you start to step back, though, because my faith that informs me that this life, our human life, is very small, tiny little piece of our eternal life. And we see things very differently. That way. And we transition to where we're destined to go. Just sooner. Now, who's sad about this? Well, not the guy that's in heaven. He isn't sad that he's in heaven because he didn't live an extra 10 years on earth. He's in eternal bliss. He's in eternal joy being in heaven. And that's what we're destined to be. We're the ones that are sad. And who are we sad for? Not that guy. Because he's in heaven. We should be sad for him. We're sad for our loss, right? Our relationship. So I think faith has a different way of framing the kind of experience, which is the death of a loved one. Or some kind of tragedy. And we see things with a frame of faith. We just don't have joy. So that was my example, right? And I just believe that on my heart that people that have faith tolerate lots of bad stuff. Because they know it's just simple. And in the end, we're passing moment. In the end, Jesus we trust that everything will be okay. That God will make everything okay. So he closes with God's joy, and he gives examples of how Jesus experienced these different things. The listed on the bottom of the page before. This is Jesus' model, giving thanks and being silent, and all those sort of things. So he's saying, if you look at the question of whether these rules make sense, he says, this is what Jesus actually did. And Jesus is joy. So we look for a model of joy. Again, you may not think, oh, it must be Milton's Doral. It must be Bob Hope. Well, it's not. It's Jesus. Okay? And so it could be a human being that we know, maybe some love or something, was joyful. It's ultimately, we're going to have a joy in the knowledge of Jesus. Because he is joy himself. Make sense? Okay. Questions? Yeah. 4 minutes? What do you think about this stuff? Did you think it was helpful? Change your mindset on this a little bit? Anything that discouraged you or maybe you said, oh, this seems like sounds good, but I'm not sure I'm going to do it for myself. What do you think? Practice with that? Yeah. And I just go back to my 3 things. Jesus is within me, Jesus is joy, Jesus loves me perfectly, and it was one salvation for me. And no matter how much I'm in a circumstance, if you're remembering those 3 things, you're never alone, you're never without joy, because Jesus is joy. You never think this is permanent. One of the other verses says, sometimes these negative things have a sense of permanence to them, and they'll never get better. It's always the matter. That's the Example, the devil wants to think. Like your stuff. You can't do this. You can't do that. You can't. And he's saying, God says, yes, you can. Because you're not doing it. I'm doing it. Just do it. And we'll do it. I'll be not doing it. You'll be with me, transforming you. So that's kind of the key of it. Is not saying it's all about me. Now you gotta overcome this. It's just going to allow God to overcome it by you cooperating and collaborating.
He's burning the motion.
Yeah. Yeah.
He certainly puts things in perspective. One of my biggest fault is envy. You know, I envy people. I envy somebody got something. So I was really very, how to combat that. And this feeling is to think of the other person as having something. You should be grateful that they have something and that you're lacking it. So in that way, you're grateful. Like what the book is saying, you have to be grateful for
What you have, yeah. Yeah. I was talking, I was at National Day, and I was talking about the electrical, and I was looking to my right at my feet, over there was the guy in the wheelchair. And I'm going, uh-oh. Now that really makes me look bad, because I'm complaining with 2 arms and 2 legs at work. About having stuff on this elliptical, it's a torture machine, and this guy would love to be able to be tortured on an elliptical, but he can't. His legs don't work anymore, right? So, comparisons can help us, because we can always find someone who will compare to. I'm really grateful that I have a functioning body, and I can go out and survive, whatever I'm doing, right? And not get a big pop and have a bad day. Because gee whiz, man, that's rough. It's rough. Yeah, so that can really help us. Yeah.
The gym certainly a place to find all that.
Yeah.
Because you see people suffering, they're sick or trying to do something.
They come, they go to rehab, or they're going through some, they're with them, or they got all sorts of bandages on, or blue pads, or whatever, or they're hurt. They got injured, and they're trying to work through it. Yeah, so gratefulness is usually useful for sure. That's thoughts. Okay. Can I be blessed for that? Okay. In the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Blessed and glory to God. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. Lord be with you.
And with his spirit.
Amen. God bless you, Father, and Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. Thanks for being here. And do me a favor, keep our series and intentions and prayers are 13 days away from the Bible. And it's in sight now, so that's what I was asking about. Which birthday did you have? It was always one of my favorite days of the year, watching these people that have been waiting months and months and several years to get into the church and receive their baptism or first communion, confirmation or first communion. See the joy on their face when they come in. That's really special. So.
I'm always amazed at the number of catechumens.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow.
Yeah. Well, and then like,
It's wonderful to see.
if one of us sponsors somebody, somebody has in the past, when you sponsor somebody, it's just like such a joy